this is sort of the semi-main event. It's a bit confusing. It's meant to be Jake Roberts and Jim Neidhart in a singles. Now, the story behind this goes, for weeks beforehand, Jim Neidhart was agreeing to the finish, taking the loss via DDT. Yes, don't worry, I'll lose. And then comes to the arena that night, or as I like to imagine it, the riverboat where the casino was, swishing back and forth. And Neidhart says, I'm not going to do it because I've possibly got a deal with the WWF to go back and team with the British Bulldog, who'd also just gone back to the WWF at that time. Now, that didn't happen. Jim never went back in a full-time capacity in that sense. And all it did was just cause a massive issue, really, quite frankly. So they ended up having to turn the singles match into a tag team match. Now, before we get to the tag team match, which is its own story, Jim Neidhart and Jake the Snake are wrestling, or some approximation of pro wrestling, in the ring for a few minutes, stumbling around. And then Jim Neidhart leaves the ring, and Jake the Snake Roberts does something with the snake. Shall we have a look what it is?
Oh, go ahead. Show this.
Okay, here we go.
I'm out of here. Wait a minute.
Do the commentary for us, Dutch. I mean, do the commentary over yourself, I suppose.
Well, I got to hear. Oh, look. Oh, this is it. What do you say to that? That's what I want to. Look at the size. Look at the size of that member. Oh my God. Now, what do you say here?
Well, I'll tell you what you will notice is that the camera is now very much focused on the crowd for quite a while. Oh, there we go. It's still happening. And then, I haven't told you this. I mean, you saw it at the time, Dutch, but then Jake, as we'd say over here, starts trying to get off with the snake in some way. He seems to start French kissing it, and basically he's just far, far too intimate.
Look at that.
There we go. Now, I'm going to stop sharing there. Right, you're back on.
Hey, where else are you going to see this, folks? Except on a wrestling pay-per-view. I mean,
you're not even going to see it in like an Alice Cooper show. I don't think he ever tried to tongue kiss the snakes on the stage.
Well, Jake, like I said, it was back in his wild days. And Jake, I bet you if you talk to him now, he might not even remember that. He may not. He got out of the ring and some woman massaged his nipples.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what? I mean, what do you say? Do you say, oh, there's a fan that's massaging Jake's little titties, and oh, there's nothing you can say other than you will embarrass yourself. So I didn't try to have dead air, but there was nothing to say.
I love that. Look at the size of that thing. I didn't even realize you'd said that.
Well, I kind of meant to say that. Look at the size of that. I kind of meant to say that, but tongue in cheek, of course. It's trying to make but it didn't take, wait a minute, a brain scientist to figure out what that kind of a thing with the snake was.
Mm. As for the rest of the match, it doesn't really matter. Basically, Yokozuna and King Kong Bundy turn up and then turn it into a tag somehow, and then the promoter's hanging around as well to sort of, I don't know what the promoter's hoping his presence was going to do there. Essentially, Jake did a good job of lying around, getting beaten up on the floor because he couldn't really get up, and then King Kong Bundy gets tagged in, splashes him, and then gets the pin. So Jake the Snake Roberts, the biggest star on the show, loses to the bad guys, but then in the end, the bad guys, I don't know, get comeuppance. And then as the show is closing out, I won't show this, I'll just tell you, Jake somehow loses his boots, he's in his socks, and then at some point he's threatening to either put the snake down his trousers or he's threatening to remove his trousers entirely.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Again, I'm speechless. All I can say is, what is he doing? I should have said, folks, He's been drinking all day. So what do you expect? I mean, this is the stuff he probably does in his room, but he said, no, you paid for this pay-per-view, so I'm going to give you something to remember. And he did.
What happened afterwards? So the cameras go off, go dark, and then what happens afterwards? Is Jake in the ring for 20 minutes naked, or what do you remember happening?
No, he gets up and leaves.
That was it.
Like the fans do. They were all out of there in like 3-4 minutes. They're gone. They took off. And then most of the wrestlers have already gone anyway. And we all go back to Jake goes back to drinking, I'm sure. I went back to my room. I was leaving early the next morning. So I forgot where I flew from. I think I flew from Nashville. What year was this?
99.
And I was in Nashville, yeah. So I flew back there and picked my money up and went home. And I tried to erase this experience from my memory, but no, thanks to you having people relive with me unpleasant experiences, I have to talk over this pay-per-view.
This is your fault. This is your fault. Last week, after we did the podcast, you said you should ask me a question about Jake the Snake Roberts, and you said, ask me if I've ever seen Jake the Snake inebriated, if I can say the word. I mean, I'm sounding
Yes, I have.
now.
And that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It was right here.
So that's why I was like, oh, well, we've got to do the pay-per-view then. So, I mean, in a kind of way, it's entirely your fault.
Well, you can blame it on me. I don't mind that. But you know, when you see guys like that, Jake had a problem. He will admit he had a problem, not only with alcohol, but with drugs. And I think he got with Dallas Page, and he underwent a alcohol program to get him off of it. And I think it has worked, because I think if Jake hadn't have done that, I don't think Jake would be with us today. No. I really don't. And I think Diamond Dallas Page probably saved his life. How old is Jake now?
Mid to late
70?
60s, something like that, yeah.
I don't know how old he is, but he looks like he has a few miles on him. Let me say that.
He's 68 years old. Let me just tell you this. I thought this was an interesting fact, that out of the 4 people in that main event, only Jake is still with us. And he was one who...
And if you looked at it, if you'd said then, who would be the last one to go? Jake would probably have been the first one to go if you were trying to, and he's outlived him. But you got to give Diamond Dallas Page some credit for that too. And Jake, he had to go in there and want to do it. Otherwise, I think he'd be gone too. I mean, we're all going to go some way, but you would think Jake would have went. He had a bad habit.
And the only other fact about this match is that neither Jake nor King Kong Bundy were the legal men in the match. Just pin him and just get out. Heroes of Wrestling was meant to be on pay-per-view again the following February, and then quarterly shows going forward, but for obvious reasons, not least they didn't get enough buys, this plan was cancelled, never to be heard of again. The show ends with Jake, I've already mentioned this, putting also the Snake on promoter Bill Stone. I've got the name in here as well. Jake had been doing interviews for local news and radio in the area in the run-up to Heroes of Wrestling, and actually been doing a very good job. You know, he was staying on the level and that kind of thing. And basically,
he was doing interviews on the run-up to it?
Yes, in the days...
And after the show, we all did a run-off to get away from it.
If you got the money, run as far away as possible. He also said, in one of these interviews promoting Heroes of Wrestling, that he wanted to clean up wrestling.
Who?
Jake did.
No, he didn't.
He apparently, this is a quote here. He wanted to clean up wrestling, is what Jake said.
And what did that mean?
Not what happened that night, I'm presuming.
When did he say this?
A few days before Heroes of Wrestling happened. So it's poor timing.
Yeah, I would say it.
Yeah.
Very poor timing.
Also around this time, it was reported that Jake's ex-wife, knowing Jake was going to get a payday from the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, had then demanded $5,000 in backdated child support, with Jake being threatened with jail if he didn't cough up. And then, as you say, he turned up in no fit state to perform. And then that's what the pay-per-view was. And that's pretty much it. That's the legacy of Heroes of Wrestling. You were probably the only good thing about it. Maybe Tully's slightly odd promo, but at least he meant it. And Stan Lane looked good.
That's like saying you're the best player on a football team that went 0-12.
You're the nicest guy in prison. You're the nicest guy in death row with Crusher Broomfield looking after you.
But you know, it was booked wrong, totally wrong. You could tell that whoever booked it didn't book it with Styles in mind. Otherwise, the Iron Sheik and whoever his partner was would not have been booked against those other two guys, because that's horrible. Abdullah and One Man Gang, they're okay because you actually worked their style, but the rest of it, they didn't even really have two good guys working with each other in the whole show. Seemed like you would have wanted to work two guys really to go out there and bust their ass for 10 minutes, 15 minutes and give them a good wrestling match. They didn't even do that.
Well, that was
it was
the
all
point
gimmicks.
that was the point with Too Cold Scorpio being on quite early, but then like he was put with someone who was really green, and then it didn't quite work out either. So anyway, it probably is the worst pay-per-view of all time.